Seoul, South Korea. The glass walls of the Nightingale Hotel shimmered in gold as dusk fell over Gangnam. Everything about the place screamed polished wealth. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, hushed laughter over fine wine. Nialuchi Marvedon strode through the main lobby like she owned the place. In black, wide-legged trousers, a silk caramel blouse tucked in perfectly, and minimal gold accessories, she was every bit the heiress. And no one here needed to know just how much. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks on the marble. She had come for one thing, to finalize the Marvedon Tech Seoul partnership, a calculated move to keep her uncle's greedy hands off the company's Asia expansion. Her parents had chosen Seoul for a reason. Long before boardrooms turned on her and lawyers circled like vultures, they saw what others didn't, that Africa's future would be shaped not only by the West, but by East Asian alliances. Her mother, a Nigerian-born logistics visionary, and her Ghanaian South African father had secured trade corridors from Accra to Busan, Nairobi to Incheon. They weren't just building wealth, they were building presence. So when they bought the Seoul Tower that would become Marvedon Asia HQ, it wasn't just about strategy. It was a message. Africa isn't asking for a seat at the table. We're building our own table on every continent. And now, standing here, Nialuchi wasn't just finalizing a deal. She was protecting a promise. She didn't have time for delays or distractions or crash, a sudden jolt, a sharp gasp. Hot liquid drenched her right sleeve and side, tea scalding. She froze, blinking in stunned silence as the contents of a porcelain teapot soaked her blouse. A waiter stood before her, stiff and horrified, tray half dropped, eyes wide like a deer about to be sued. Her nostrils flared. "Are you out of your mind?" Her voice cut like glass. "Is this how you treat guests at this overpriced showpiece of a hotel?" Miss, do you know how much this blouse costs? Do you know who I am?" Silence. The waiter blinked once. Then, with startling calm, he reached for a clean napkin and gently offered it. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and almost amused, "you were turning too fast while checking your reflection. Technically, we both failed the right of way." Her mouth parted slightly. Did this man just blame her? "And I assume your blouse came with extra wisdom," he continued. "But if it didn't, I'm truly sorry. I'll cover the dry cleaning cost, just not the attitude surcharge." Nialuchi's brain stalled. She wasn't used to this. Not from waiters. Not from anyone. Not in her world. "What's your name?" she snapped. The man smiled, calm and unreadable. "Just Juhyun." She narrowed her eyes. "Last name?" "No need for that. I'm not applying for a position in your life." And with that, he bowed slightly and disappeared into the kitchen like a phantom with manners. Hours later, jet lag pulled at her temples. The contract meeting had gone as expected. Numbers, smirks, thinly veiled threats. Her lawyer would handle the rest. But her thoughts kept circling back to that snarky waiter. So when sleep didn't come, and the city's neon pulse called her outside, she let it. At 11:43 p.m., she found herself walking into a modest cafe tucked behind a side street near Hongdae. Soft jazz played in the background. No pretense. Just real wood tables, mugs with chipped edges, and the smell of real roasted beans. And there he was. Him. Wearing a gray hoodie this time, behind the counter, rinsing mugs like he wasn't the same man who made her feel like a malfunctioning human earlier. He looked up, paused, smiled, but said nothing. She raised a brow. "What, no apology coffee?" He poured a cup. "You strike me as more of a hibiscus tea kind of woman." Her lips twitched before she could stop them. Observant. He slid the cup across the counter. "Juhyun," he said again. Still not applying for a position. She took a seat. Nialuchi. No last name? Not applying either. They sipped, talked, about Seoul, about how much she hated the cold, about her love for her mother's jollof, and the night her father let her fly his private jet at age 17. She didn't say it was a private jet, just a small plane. Just enough to be honest without being known. He told her he once got into Korea's top university, but had to drop out after his mom's medical bills overwhelmed them. She didn't say sorry, just asked what he wanted to do if money wasn't a problem. Strategy, he said. Problem solving. I like reading people, systems, outmaneuvering people who think they're always 10 steps ahead. She stared at him. That's very niche. I think people only play chess when they know they have something worth protecting. That line hit deeper than he knew. They talked for hours. She laughed, really laughed. For the first time in weeks, he teased her, called her out, didn't try to impress her, and that, more than anything, impressed her. 4:26 a.m. She sat in the back of her chauffeur-driven car as the skyline blinked outside. The driver waited for confirmation of her airport drop-off. Her phone buzzed with her itinerary. Ms. Marvedon, would you like me to take the Incheon route? She stared at her screen, at the ticket, the meeting back home, the uncle who was probably already plotting, and at the memory of a man with no business card, no last name, and no fear. She opened her phone and called the airline. Yes, this is Nialuchi Marvedon. I need to cancel my flight. For the first time in her life, she wanted to stay, not for power, not for strategy, but for the one man who didn't flinch at her fire and might just be the only one who could match it. A few days later, the sun had barely cleared the horizon when her phone buzzed with a reminder. Flight to Lagos, 8:35 a.m. She silenced it. Her heart wasn't in airports today. It was wandering the streets of Seoul with a man who seemed to see straight through her polished armor. Later that afternoon, Nialuchi waited outside the cafe, hands tucked into the pockets of her cream trench coat. A soft breeze lifted her curls as footsteps approached. You canceled it, Juhyun said quietly, stopping beside her. She shrugged like it was no big deal. They'll reschedule. His gaze held hers. Most people don't cancel their lives for strangers. She lifted a brow. Are you a stranger? He didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head toward the sidewalk. Hungry? They wandered through Myeongdong, where steam curled from food carts and laughter spilled out of crowded shops. Try this, he said, offering her tteokbokki on a toothpick. She accepted and immediately hissed, Hot! Hot! He chuckled, eyes bright. You dive into everything with no caution, don't you? Caution is for people with something to lose, she said before thinking. But Juhyun did think. His smile faded. Everyone has something to lose, even you. She held his gaze, unsettled, because he wasn't wrong. They stopped again, this time for hotteok dripping brown sugar. I grew up everywhere, she said finally, surprising even herself. Johannesburg, Nairobi, Paris, Accra, ridiculous mansions, private tutors, but peace. Her voice wavered for half a second. Peace was always missing. He didn't interrupt, didn't pity, just listened. My parents died when I was 20, she continued. Since then, my uncle and aunt run the family company with me, but they want me married, so control is easier. Juhyun's brows pulled together. That doesn't sound like family. It's not, she said with a humorless laugh. Then he said something so simple, so honest. It stunned her. Family should never feel like a cage. She swallowed hard. They walked through a quieter alley now. Lanterns swayed overhead. My father left when I was 8, he said softly. Just disappeared. My mother worked 3 jobs so I could stay in school. I tested into Seoul National University, business and strategy major. A faint smile. I loved it. For a year. What happened? She whispered. Medical bills? He exhaled slowly. I didn't want Mom dying in debt, so I dropped out to work. The weight of his words sat heavy between them. So, now you're a waiter working night shifts and wiping entitled heiresses' designer blouses? She teased gently. His lips tilted. Sometimes I get lucky, and the heiress is actually interesting. She rolled her eyes, but warmth bloomed in her chest. They reached a rooftop overlooking neon-lit Seoul. Lights glittered like spilled jewels. Wind tangled her curls. He stood close. Too close. But she didn't move. You know, she murmured, you speak like a man who should be leading companies, not serving them. He shrugged. Life doesn't ask permission before dealing the cards. And you're just accepting that hand? Accepting? No. His eyes flickered with quiet fire, studying the table. She smiled. God, she was in trouble. Back on the ground, they reached another market. This one louder, more chaotic. A man at a stall waved tourists toward a display of gold jewelry. Real 24-karat gold, the seller declared, pushing a bracelet toward a foreigner and his wife. It's fake, Juhyun whispered to her. How do you know? His hands, he murmured, stained with brass polish. She looked more closely. He was right. And he tested the bracelet with a magnet, Juhyun added, nodding toward the seller's pocket. Gold isn't magnetic. Before she could respond, the seller turned to them. Beautiful couple discount. 70% off for lovebirds. Juhyun leaned in slightly, arm brushing hers. We're not lovebirds, he said coolly, and those aren't gold. They're brass coated with electroplating. If they were real, the clasp would be stamped, and magnets wouldn't stick. The seller's smile collapsed. He grabbed her hand. Let's go. They slipped into the moving crowd, laughter bursting from her throat. You enjoyed that, she accused. Maybe a little, he said, smug but adorable. She stared at him, curiosity overtaking caution. You could outthink a boardroom full of sharks, she whispered. He looked down at her. Why do you think I'm standing next to one? Her heart misfired. When she returned to her hotel, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the glittering skyline, replaying every word, every flicker in his eyes. She had met countless men, politicians, CEOs, princes. None of them had made her feel anything. But a waiter with a strategist's mind? He made her rethink every defense she had ever built. And in that moment, she realized something undeniable. Seoul wasn't the reason she stayed. He was. Morning hit Seoul with a rush of traffic and urgency, mirroring the knot pressing into Nialuchi's stomach. She stood on the balcony of her suite, staring at the steaming cup in her hands. Hibiscus tea. The memory of last night's laughter with Juhyun still warmed her chest. But her phone shattered the peace. Auntie Rin. Incoming call. She inhaled sharply and answered. Why are you still in Korea? Her aunt's clipped British accented tone blasted immediately. Good morning to you too, Nialuchi thought. I had business, she replied evenly. That business is concluded. You should be boarding your flight this morning. There was a pause. Too heavy, too knowing. We have taken care of the fiancé situation, Aunt Irene added. Your engagement will be formally announced at the gala next Saturday. Ice crawled up her spine. I never agreed, Nialuchi said coldly. You don't need to, the woman replied. Your uncle signed the papers. The arrangement stands. It's in your best interest. Best interest? In their language, it meant obedience. You can't marry me off like a product. Her voice lowered to a dangerous whisper. This isn't the 14th century. And yet, her aunt said, her tone smooth as poison, inheritance laws can be traditional. Come home. The call dropped. Her hands trembled, not in fear, but fury. She marched downstairs to clear her head, needing space, oxygen, anything before she... Everything okay? A familiar voice asked. She turned. Juhyun, hoodie, apron, slightly messy hair, calm eyes that somehow always saw deeper than she liked. He had overheard more than she intended. She could tell by the way his jaw clenched. Your family is forcing you into marriage? He asked carefully. She looked away, anger cracking in her chest. They're afraid I'll block their takeover of my company. So they want a puppet spouse? A complacent husband who will sign documents while I sign divorce papers, she muttered. His expression darkened. Not pity, something colder, calculating. And you? He asked. What do you want? Her throat tightened unexpectedly. To be free, she whispered. He nodded once, as if that was all he needed to know. Come with me, he said. He led her to an empty table in the back of the cafe, away from customers. He pulled out a small black notebook, flipped to a clean page, and drew 3 circles. A, aunt and uncle. B, the groom-to-be. C, her. Lines connected each point with arrows and notes. You're here, he tapped the C circle. Cornered by them. They want you trapped between legacy and marriage. She stared surprised. That's accurate. But he drew a 4th circle. D, independent authority. This is your escape. He looked up at her. You need a legal ally that outranks their control. Someone you choose. A marriage contract cannot override a majority owner if her assets are secured elsewhere. She blinked. How do you know all this? My major was business strategy, he said simply, until life changed the syllabus. He sketched rapidly, voice low but sharp. Freeze at-risk shares. Pull leverage from marriage. Create a proxy protection under her name. Trigger audit on forged contracts. Turn fiancé into corporate liability. Finally, he circled everything twice. Attack from the angle they think is weakest, he said. Your independence? Her pulse kicked into a sprint. This is war, she breathed. It already started, he replied. You just weren't fighting back yet. She stared, hard, at this man with no business card, no corporate title, and yet a mind lethal enough to dismantle billionaire sharks. Nobody has ever tried to protect my freedom, she said softly. He leaned closer. So close she caught the faint scent of coffee on his skin. I help people I care about, he murmured. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Care? Already? Nialuchi sat back, her eyes burning. Not from tears, but decision. Juhyun. She paused, choosing each word like a chess move. Help me win. Help me end them before they end me. His gaze held hers, unwavering. I'm with you, he said, to the very end. And for the first time since she was 20 years old and orphaned overnight, she wasn't alone on the battlefield. A message pinged on her phone. Breaking news. Marvedon Global to announce heiress's engagement. Exclusive event planned. A photo loaded below the headline. Her, standing beside a man she'd never spoken to in her life. Her blood boiled. The war had officially begun, and she had just chosen her general, the strategist with nothing to lose and her legacy to win. The next 48 hours turned Seoul into a war room. Nialuchi barely slept. She and Juhyun stationed themselves at the dining table of her hotel suite. Laptops open, papers everywhere, Tension electric. She had met brilliant lawyers, polished advisors, multinational strategists. None of them worked like him. Clause 14 is their trap, Juhyun said, leaning over the table, one hand braced beside her laptop. Your uncle inserted a line that allows marital oversight of all overseas subsidiaries. That's illegal without my signature. And he forged it, Juhyun added. See the change in font weight? Whoever altered this didn't match the digital typeface perfectly. Her eyes widened. She zoomed in. The evidence stared back. She looked at him, not the document, at the fire in his eyes. Who are you? She whispered. He shrugged slightly. A man who hates bullies. His calm confidence made her pulse race. Their next stop, an investor conference at a sleek Gangnam tower. Nialuchi was supposed to assure stakeholders that she was stable and cooperative. Instead, she arrived with a storm. The room was filled with stiff suits, skeptical expressions. Headlines about her engagement scandal had shaken investor confidence. Everything smelled like a setup. Her uncle expected her to buckle. But Juhyun stood just off stage beside the curtain, pretending to adjust audio cables, blending into the staff. His eyes found hers. You're not alone. She swallowed the surge of courage. We will no longer pursue the arranged merger projected in your reports, she announced firmly. Gasps, raised voices. A chairman stood, face red. This is reckless. Your family vetted the merger. That's exactly the problem, she cut in. Their version hides a funneling scheme. The screen behind her suddenly flicked to a new slide. Juhyun's doing. The hidden clause. The doctored percentage redirect. Proven, undeniable. Investors turned from suspicion to shock, then grudging respect. What do you propose? One woman asked. Nialuchi smiled, sharp as a blade. A smarter partner. One who values innovation over manipulation. As questions fired, she answered with command and clarity, her words guided by Juhyun's quiet signals. A subtle nod, a scribbled number, a pointed look. Her uncle's sabotage had just been flipped. Hard. Afterward, she stepped outside the tower, exhaling like she had held her breath for years. Juhyun joined her, backpack slung over one shoulder. You were unstoppable in there, he said. I had backup, she replied. He looked away, suddenly shy. I only nudged. You changed the entire direction of the meeting, Juhyun. He gave a modest half smile. Maybe nudged a little harder than I thought. Their laughter eased the adrenaline, but the fight wasn't over. That night, he brought her to a tiny rooftop restaurant owned by one of his mother's friends. Seoul's skyline glittered around them. Bowls of kimchi jjigae and rice steamed between them. His mother arrived later, small in stature, strong in presence. She eyed Nialuchi with a quiet, piercing gaze. Not judgment, discernment. You're the woman keeping my son awake at night, Mrs. Lee said simply. Blood rushed to Nialuchi's cheeks. Mom? Juhyun groaned. Mrs. Lee ignored him. She sat leaning forward. I raised a good son. Smart, good heart. But he doesn't understand yet. You can't win a war in someone else's world. Silence. You are wealthy. Powerful. He is not. She continued gently. Your enemies will not fight fair. They will come for him first. Nialuchi's breath caught. Juhyun reached for his mother's hand. I know, Mom, but I choose this. Mrs. Lee studied him, then nodded once, small but full of faith. Then win, and don't look back. Later, walking her back to her hotel, the air was cold, but their closeness was warm. They paused at the entrance. Streetlights cast soft halos around them. You didn't have to do all this, she murmured. I wanted to, he said. And I'll keep helping. Until you have your freedom. Her heart slammed. You talk like you expect nothing in return. I don't, he whispered. I just want... He stopped, unsure. She took a step closer. They were inches apart. You just want what? She breathed. His eyes flickered to her lips. To see you win. To see you safe. And maybe to be the person who gets to stay by your side when it's over. A tremble moved through her. Not fear, but recognition. She cupped his jaw lightly, thumb brushing the stubble on his cheek. And what if, she murmured, I want you by my side before it's over. Then she kissed him, not shy, not hesitant. A kiss of possession, of promise, of war declared, and hearts chosen. He exhaled against her mouth, hands rising to cradle her face, pulling her closer, like the world might end if he let go. When they parted, both breathless, both changed, she whispered, Let's burn their plans to the ground. His answering smile was pure fire. Let's do it. At that exact moment, an encrypted email arrived in her inbox. Urgent legal notice. Change to inheritance structure. Confidential. Her uncle had made a countermove, but now, so did she, and she had her strategist. War was officially balanced. The taste of Juhyun's kiss still lingered days later. Warm, electric, unforgettable. And while they never talked about what they were now, their actions filled the silence. Her hand found his arm when they crossed the street. He brushed curls from her face during late-night strategy sessions. Their gazes lingered longer than any just business reason could justify. But Seoul was watching. Eyes followed her everywhere, especially when she stood beside a man with no title. The heiress and her waiter. The first article appeared at dawn. A leaked photo. Her laughing with Juhyun in the night market. His hoodie. Her designer coat. Headline, Marvedon heiress dating a nobody. The fall of a legacy. More photos followed. Their almost kisses, hands brushing, his jacket around her shoulders. Her uncle didn't even hide his delight. He called her once. A woman like you should know better than to invest in scrap. She hung up before she screamed, but the damage had been seeded. The next day, journalists swarmed outside her hotel, microphones thrusting, "Who is the mystery man? Are wedding plans off? Is he your rebellion?" Security blocked them off, but rumors had already blossomed like weeds. That evening, another headline surfaced, this one far worse. Juhyun Lee, university dropout, father missing, mother in debt, gold digger targeting billion-dollar heiress. All his raw childhood struggle turned into ammunition. Her chest ached reading it. She knew exactly who leaked it. But when she stormed downstairs to find him, he was gone. His phone off, his messages unread, his apron left folded on the cafe counter. Mrs. Lee met Nialuchi at the door, guilt in her eyes. "He thinks he embarrassed you," she whispered. "I embarrassed him?" Nialuchi choked out. "He's proud," Mrs. Lee said. "Too proud to be seen as someone you have to defend." Those words pierced deeper than any article. 2 days, no sign of him. Those days reminded her of being orphaned, how silence can feel like a grave. She sat in her suite, staring at the skyline. Everything she had, money, legacy, power, felt pointless without the one person who saw her. She didn't want a strategist anymore. She didn't want an ally. She wanted him. And if she had to cross the world to find him, she would. Busan. A clue. A colleague of his mentioned a friend running a cafe in Busan. So before dawn, she boarded the first bullet train south, heart hammering faster than the tracks beneath her. The air smelled like sea salt and fresh beginnings. She found the cafe, a charming wooden deck overlooking the pier. Fishing boats bobbed in the sunshine. Waves crashed like applause. There he was, hair windswept, sleeves rolled, serving customers who had no idea he once dismantled a multi-million-dollar sabotage plot. Her breath caught. She stepped closer. Juhyun. He froze, turned, shock, hurt, love, all in one look. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Not after the stories, the pictures. Do you believe them? She asked, stepping closer still. I believe, he said, voice tight, that your world doesn't have room for me. Not without a cost. She stared up at him, pain turning to fury. Not at him, but at every force trying to shrink his worth. You think I care what anyone calls you? She demanded. You think I'd trade a man like you for a coward in a suit with clean headlines? He swallowed, hard. You helped me fight, she said, her voice softening. Now let me help you build. Not as a charity case. She touched his chest over his heartbeat. But as my equal. His eyes shone, hope wrestling with fear. You deserve someone untouchable, he whispered. No, she said, almost laughing through tears. I deserve someone who isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. The ocean roared with the confession between them. For the first time, he didn't look away from her love. He stepped closer, foreheads nearly touching. Anger melted, doubt dissolved. I missed you, he said. She breathed the words into his lips. Then don't leave me again. This time, he kissed her first. No hesitation, no fear of headlines, no running, just fire, just love, just a strategist choosing his queen. And in that moment, on that pier in Busan, the war changed sides. They returned to Seoul together, not as heiress and waiter, not as scandal and shame, but as partners. Nialuchi stepped off the train with Juhyun beside her, fingers grazing, matching strides. He wasn't hiding anymore, and she wasn't asking permission to choose him. The tabloids still murmured, the headlines still buzzed, but Seoul looked different now, like a chessboard tilted in their favor. I don't want you just at my side, she said as they walked through the Marvedon Tower doors the next morning. I want you in the room. Juhyun blinked. You mean? I want to put your name on the dotted line, she cut in. As CEO of your own firm. He stared. She smirked. Don't look at me like that. I've already hired 2 top consultants. You'll have a starting team, legal counsel, my network. Nia, she turned fully. You helped me protect my legacy. Let me fund yours. He looked at her like he might break. Then he stepped closer, brushing his hand along the line of her jaw. You don't have to give me a kingdom. She leaned in. I'm not. I'm giving you the sword. It was time to deal with Kichi, her cousin, slick, charming, and leaking confidential R&D proposals to competitors. He'd been planted as a distraction, a family puppet with a smile. But Juhyun had studied every boardroom vote from the last year. Patterns, abstentions, timing. He handed her the analysis. He delays key votes until he can predict the majority. Your uncle's team backs him silently. You need 2 independents to flip. Done, Nialuchi said. That evening, she hosted a private strategy dinner. Not for the family, but for the independents. Juhyun sat quietly in the corner, watching, advising silently. It was elegant, deadly. Kichi entered the next board meeting wearing a navy blue suit and a cocky grin. By the end of it, he left with none of his voting power and a notice of formal investigation into IP leaks. Check, Juhyun murmured into her ear as the board adjourned. She laughed, high and light, but her hand gripped his under the table. They were unstoppable. Later that night, she brought him to the rooftop. The city lights stretched like constellations across the skyline. "I used to come up here alone," she murmured, "before meetings, when I was afraid I'd lose everything." "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I know." She turned to him, brushing a hand through his hair, letting her thumb linger near his temple. "You make me believe again. In people, in partnership, in—" She stopped herself. He pulled her gently into his arms, pressing her forehead against his. "You don't have to say it yet," he whispered, "but I already know." The next morning, while reviewing archived Marvedon contracts for legal security restructuring, Juhyun frowned. "Why are there duplicate files in 2 different servers?" he muttered. A clause from Nialuchi's mother's original will, hidden deep in an unrelated folder, flashed before his eyes. He clicked, scanned, then froze. It was an amendment, a forgery. On first glance, it stated Nialuchi would only have full inheritance if married and jointly managing with her spouse. The clause was digitally signed, with a date timestamped 3 days after her parents' death. That clause didn't exist in any original legal copy, and the digital signature, faked. The amendment wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. He printed it out, backed the data up, encrypted the files in 3 locations, and then rushed to find her. He found her in the glass conference room of Marvedon HQ, standing at the head of the table, fierce and regal, as she spoke to the team about the new Africa-Asia Pipeline Initiative. She glanced up when he stepped in, sensing something was off. "I need to speak with you, now," he said. She excused herself without hesitation, heels clicking down the hallway beside him. "What is it?" she asked, concern deepening in her brow. He handed her the file. Her hands shook as she read it. The date, the forgery, her uncle's signature, her mother's legacy. Her voice broke when she finally spoke. "They've been preparing to erase me for years." Juhyun's voice was ice. "Not anymore." Nialuchi looked up at him, tears unshed, rage and clarity burning in her gaze. "You found the thing that could bring them down." He met her stare. "No, we did." And in that moment, they weren't just partners in love, they were co-commanders of a storm. Night wrapped around Seoul like a velvet curtain as Nialuchi stood in her office, fingers trembling around the forged document. The city lights blurred, not from fog, but from the memory clawing its way to the surface. She hadn't thought about that night in years, but now she couldn't escape it. Flashback. The day fate took everything. She was 20, sitting at a university cafe in Cape Town when the call came. A stranger's voice, neutral, cruelly calm. "Miss Marvedon, there has been an accident." She remembered freezing, remembered the taste of blood in her mouth from biting back a scream, remembered her uncle's arms around her shortly after, squeezing grief into silence. "You must be strong," he said. "Your parents would want you focused. You have a company to inherit." They shoved contracts before her when she hadn't even buried them yet. She didn't read, she just signed. Because what else does a girl with shattered parents do when the only adults left are smiling like saviors? Her knees buckled at the memory in the present, and Juhyun caught her. "We need to authenticate the original will," he said firmly. "Every copy." "There's only one that matters," she whispered, "locked in a vault in Johannesburg." "I'll get us a forensic lawyer," he told her. "A good one. The best." She stared. This man, who once scrubbed dishes in silence, was now orchestrating legal warfare like it was destiny stitched into his bones. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked. "Because your story isn't finished," he replied, "and I refuse to let them write your ending." The next day, Juhyun brought in attorney Yoon Chanseo, a forensic specialist known for dismantling fraudulent cases with surgical precision. He examined the forged clause, This, he said, eyes narrowing, will bury whoever did it. Nialuchi felt a tremor of fear and relief. Two emotions she hadn't allowed to coexist until Juhyun. That evening, she said, "There's somewhere I want to go." They drove 2 hours outside Seoul. The city faded to mountains and pine trees until a secluded gated villa appeared, modern glass and warm wood overlooking a lake. "My parents bought this after I turned 15, she said quietly. "We used to spend summers here. It was the last place I saw them happy." He followed her inside. The air smelled like cedar and memory. "After they died, I never came back. Too many ghosts." He stepped closer, brushing a curl behind her ear. "I don't see ghosts," he murmured. "I see roots." Her breath caught. They explored. Her mother's piano, untouched. Her father's favorite chessboard, dusty but waiting. Family photos. Her smile wild and untamed. He watched her soften, unravel, heal in real time. They stood on the villa's back deck. Night reflected on the water beneath them. "Sometimes I think love is a luxury," she whispered. "I was raised for battle, not peace." He brushed a knuckle along her cheek. "You deserve both." She looked up, searching his face. "Do you ever get scared? That I'll lose everything and you'll be dragged down with me?" He chuckled softly. "You're asking the wrong question. What's the right one?" His hand cupped her jaw, thumb stroking the corner of her mouth. "Aren't you scared I'll become someone they can't defeat?" Her heart slammed, and she kissed him. Not the desperate kiss in Busan, not the fire-fueled promise after battle. This was slow, tender. A trust pact sealed in breath and lips and quiet certainty. He kissed her back like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission. They didn't rush, didn't stumble into passion blindly. They let the moment bloom. She pulled him inside, and they lay down fully clothed on her childhood bed. Faces inches apart, hands intertwined on the sheets like vows. His forehead rested against hers. "No fear," he whispered. "No masks," she returned. Her eyes fluttered shut as he pressed a soft kiss to her brow. Their legs tangled, heartbeats synced, breathing slowed into shared rhythm. Not hunger, not lust, home. For the first time since the world broke her, she slept safely in someone's arms. At dawn, his phone buzzed, an encrypted message from attorney Yoon. "Found something else." Not just a forged clause, a forged death certificate timestamp. "Your uncle moved the date." Juhyun's eyes widened. He looked at Nialuchi, still asleep beside him. The truth was darker than they imagined. This wasn't just fraud. It was a plot years in the making, and now they were ready to expose it. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and warfare. Nialuchi sat tall in navy and silver, every inch a queen with her fingers laced tightly over her lap. Beside her, Juhyun didn't fidget, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead like a man who came not to plead, but to win. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at the ruling documents. Having reviewed the evidence, especially the inconsistencies in the digital signature, altered timestamps, and the verified statement from attorney Yoon, this court finds that the clause demanding Ms. Marvedon's marriage to retain her inheritance was unlawfully inserted. The clause is hereby rendered void. Gavel. Silence. Then an audible gasp from the right row, where her uncle and his wife sat like a pair of vultures who just lost the kill. A crack of relief bloomed through Nialuchi's chest, but she didn't smile. She simply reached down and intertwined her fingers with Juhyun's beneath the table. The next morning, they woke to war. Headlines blared across every platform. Heiress defies tradition. $1 billion legacy. Now co-linked to ex-waiter. boyfriend, strategic scam, or love story, inside the man who toppled the Marvedon marriage plot. From kitchen boy to kingmaker, Seoul isn't buying it. Juhyun read in silence, jaw tight. "It's beginning," he said simply. "You were a threat the moment you outplayed them," Nialuchi replied, sipping her tea. "Now they're just screaming because you beat them at their own game." But the screams grew louder. One investor called to say he was reevaluating his comfort with their partnership. Another subtly asked if she would be pursuing a less emotional leadership direction. A third said he'd be watching her next move very closely. They were circling her like wolves, pressuring her to cut ties with the man who gave her the sword she'd used to survive. But she didn't waver. She booked the ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel, not for a gala, not for an apology tour, but for a press event. "You don't owe them anything," Juhyun had said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm doing it on my own terms." She walked on stage that night in an elegant white pantsuit and heels that didn't forgive weakness. Flashbulbs snapped. Murmurs rippled. "I'm not here to explain myself," she began, voice clear, confident. "I'm here to introduce the man who helped me reclaim my voice, my mind, and my legacy." The screens behind her came to life. Flashes of legal diagrams, Juhyun's strategy notes, the forged contract side by side with the real one. Gasps. "This is Juhyun Lee," she continued, as he walked slowly to her side, suited, composed. "He is the founder of Axis Strategies, my new official partner in international ventures, and—" She paused, turning to him. "He's the man I trust, not just in business, but in life." Click, click, click. Paparazzi swallowed every second. But she wasn't performing. She was declaring war. That night, she returned to Marvedon Tower to find her uncle waiting. He stood by the window of her office, scotch in hand like he still believed he was in control. "You just cost us 3 board members," he said. "Good," she replied. "We needed to weed out the cowards." He turned to face her, smile curdling. "You've made your point. Now undo it. No. End this. Fling. Or I will freeze every account. I will challenge your inheritance. I will drag your name through enough courts to keep you out of your own company until you're 40. She walked closer, standing toe-to-toe with him. "You can threaten my bank accounts, my seat on the board, even my name." Then she leaned in, voice like steel wrapped in silk. "But I'd rather start over from scratch than sell out the one person who actually stood by me when all of you were selling me off like cattle." He blinked. "You think love will protect you?" "No," she said, and her eyes gleamed. "I will protect me, and he will stand beside me while I do it." She walked out without another word. The door didn't slam behind her. It closed quietly, which was somehow more terrifying. Later that night, on the rooftop, Nialuchi and Juhyun stood in silence. The wind tugged at their clothes. The stars blinked dimly overhead. He looked at her with quiet reverence. "You knew he'd threaten everything," he murmured. "I also knew you'd still choose me." His jaw clenched. "You deserve more than headlines like this." She turned to face him, hands on his chest. "I don't care what they call me. Heiress, fool, traitor, romantic." Then she kissed him. Soft, deep, soul deep. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "As long as you know what I am." He pressed his forehead to hers. "My equal," he said. But far below the rooftop, inside the family law office, her uncle handed over an envelope to his legal team. A new target, Juhyun Lee. It was time for him to be erased too, or so they thought, because what her uncle didn't know was that Juhyun had already prepared the next move, and this time, he wasn't playing for defense. He was going for checkmate. The storm didn't begin with thunder, it began with a vote. Nialuchi stood in the center of the long mahogany table, surrounded by board members, some who once kissed her cheeks and called her our future. Now they wouldn't even look her in the eye. "The motion has been passed," one announced stiffly. "You are to step down as CEO, effective immediately." Her pulse didn't spike. Her hands didn't shake. She simply smiled, a razor disguised as grace. "And who will run the company?" she asked, voice like velvet on a knife's edge. A familiar voice answered from the doorway. Her uncle. He walked in smugly, clapping slowly. Someone who understands stability. Someone not distracted by romantic entanglements. She ignored the bait. She looked at the board. "You think cowards will protect you when I'm gone? You think submission is the way forward?" They didn't respond, because shame can't speak when fear is choking it. That afternoon, Juhyun's phone exploded with notifications, hate comments, voicemail threats, photos of him posted with slurs scribbled across captions. Comment sections turned into bonfires. Leech, opportunist, street rat playing king. Then came the business hit. The largest conglomerate in Korea, Juhyun Group, announced they were blacklisting his new agency. No contracts, no investors, no future. His office emptied in hours. Consultants apologized through clenched teeth. One assistant cried. Another simply left his badge on the desk and walked out. And Juhyun watched it all happen with a calm he did not feel. His world, already fragile, was being dropped from skyscraper height. That night, Nialuchi found him alone in his agency office, surrounded by boxes and silence. His eyes were dark, hurt disguised as endurance. "I warned you," he said quietly. "Your world eats people like me alive." She stepped closer. "You don't belong to my world." "Oh?" He let out a humorless laugh. "What world do I belong to then? The gutter I crawled out of? The serving trays? The failures?" Her heart cracked. "Don't you dare call yourself that," she snapped. He shook his head. "This is what happens when I stand beside you. Your empire is cracking and mine is ash." She reached for his hand. He pulled it away. Pain shot through her chest like shrapnel. "So what?" she whispered. "You're leaving?" Silence devoured the air. He looked at her slowly, like he was afraid of what he'd say next. "I can lose clients," he said in a voice rough with conviction. "I can lose money, titles, every dream I've ever built." He took a step toward her, then another. "And if that's the price of being with you, I'll pay it." Now he was inches away. "But they don't get to take you," he whispered. "They don't get you." Her breath crumpled into a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Because in a world that wanted to own every part of her, he wanted nothing but her heart. She cupped his face, pressing her forehead to his. "We will rebuild together," she promised, brick by brick, strategy by strategy, win by win. He let out a shaky breath. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," she said, "because I'm choosing you. And I'm not stopping." His fingers finally threaded through hers, gripping like a vow. Together, they sat at his lone remaining desk, surrounded by flickering screens and half-packed files. He slid a list across to her. Board members, investors, politicians. "All the ones who voted you out," he said. "Every one of them is tied to your uncle through favors, debts, scandals waiting to unfold." She stared at him. This man who once served her tea, now serving her a path back to her empire. "We start with the strongest," he said, "and break the chain from within," she finished. Their eyes locked. They didn't need to kiss to seal this strategy, but they did anyway, slowly, passionately, as if their lips had become the only safe place left in the world. A notification chimed between them. A single email. From Anonymous. Subject, "You're not ready for what comes next." Attached, a surveillance photo of Juhyun leaving his mother's apartment, circled in red. Her family wasn't just coming for them. They were coming for the people they loved. The war had officially turned personal. The lights of Seoul shimmered below like broken diamonds. Glittering, fractured, beautiful. Nialuchi stood alone on the balcony of her apartment, dressed in an oversized blazer and silk lounge pants. Her curls were undone, her makeup gone, her armor cracked. Behind her, the empire her parents built was burning. Piece by piece, vote by vote, headline by headline. She had fought. She had won battles. But the war had left her bleeding in places no one could see. And for the first time since her parents' death, she whispered out loud, "Is it even worth saving?" The scent came first. Jasmine and cloves, her mother's perfume, a scent that always lingered longer than expected. Then memory cracked open. She was 12, sitting on the floor of the old study in their Johannesburg estate, surrounded by her mother's sketches, mock-ups for a Pan-African shipping network that hadn't existed yet. Nialuchi had asked, "Is this how you get rich?" Her mother had smiled. "No, baby. This is how you build legacy. Money ends. Vision endures." Then she took her daughter's face in both hands and whispered, "You were born with more than wealth. You were born with vision. That's your inheritance." That memory had lived in her bones ever since. But tonight, it returned like prophecy. Later, in the kitchen, she found Juhyun making tea, barefoot, hoodie sleeves rolled, hair wild from too many days of battle. He turned and froze when he saw her. She wasn't dressed for war. She was dressed for surrender. "You okay?" he asked, gently setting the mug down. She stared at him, lips trembling. "If I walk away," she whispered, "if I burn everything my family built, do I become nothing?" "No," he said, walking toward her without hesitation. "You become free." Her eyes filled. "And what would I do, Juhyun? Who would I be if I'm not fighting to protect what they left me?" He reached for her hand and placed it over his chest. "You'd be the woman who used her power to build something no one could touch." He paused, then added, "And if you'll let me, I'll help you build it." The next morning, she didn't meet with lawyers. She didn't review statements or damage control PR. She met with educators, urban architects, tech developers, philanthropic strategists. She drafted something new, not a company, not a holding, a vision, the Marvedon Legacy Foundation, a multinational platform to fund young Black entrepreneurs, tech-savvy creators from underserved communities, and global education pipelines between Africa and Asia. No board votes, no share threats, no clause that could erase her. This was her rebirth. That evening, Juhyun arrived at the new office, a converted historic building in Mapogu, Seoul. She handed him a pen. He stared at the signature line on the founding charter, his name, right beside hers. "You sure?" he asked. "Juhyun," she said, holding his gaze, "you helped me win a war, but more than that, you helped me see past it. You helped me believe I wasn't created to survive someone else's dream." He didn't respond with words. He signed. Then he kissed her, deep, certain. Like building something together was more intimate than any vow. They stood in the empty hallway of the new headquarters, construction dust still clinging to the floor, paint cans unopened, windows bare. But in the center, a table, and on it, 2 mugs of coffee, 1 notebook full of scribbled ideas, and their hands, still joined, no boardroom, no spotlight, just two people ready to build a new world. In a dark conference room across the city, her uncle slammed a folder shut. "She's moved the power," he muttered. An associate blinked. "We can't reach her foundation. It's privately funded, protected." The uncle stared at the skyline. "She wants war?" His eyes narrowed. "She's about to get one." It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday, but Nialuchi should have known better. In her world, peace was never more than a pause between wars. She was sipping her tea when the alert came through on her phone. Breaking. Leaked hotel surveillance footage. Sparks affair rumors. Is Marvedon's heiress sleeping with her top investor? There were screenshots. Blurry, grainy stills of her entering a hotel restaurant with Elijah Kwong, an old business ally from Shanghai. One photo showed them leaving late. Another showed Elijah's hand briefly touching her lower back. Her tea fell from her hand and shattered on the floor. Juhyun didn't text, didn't call, didn't show up to the office. When he finally arrived late that afternoon, his face was unreadable, his eyes clouded. She was already waiting in the conference room, a printed copy of the article on the table between them. "You saw it," she said flatly. He nodded. "And?" He hesitated. That hesitation did more damage than 1,000 accusations. "You think it's true?" she whispered, voice cracking. "No," he said quickly. Why didn't you tell me you were meeting him?" "Because it was a business dinner. You were out of the country securing the Lagos pitch. Elijah was already in town. It wasn't a secret." "He touched you," Juhyun said quietly. "And you did kiss the waitress who helped you after your accident in Tokyo." "That was different." Her hand slammed the table. "No, Juhyun. What's different is that I didn't flinch when the world attacked you. I defended you, even when it cost me everything. And now, the first bullet they shoot at me, you duck." "I didn't duck," he growled. "I paused. I'm human." She blinked. "So am I." A beat of silence. Then she stepped back, gathering her phone and her pride. "Maybe I expected too much from a man who didn't grow up in rooms like mine." His face went still. And just like that, she walked out. That night, she went back to the villa. No staff, no calls, just rain tapping glass and the hum of loneliness. She stared out over the lake and whispered to the dark, "Was I wrong to believe in him?" Juhyun sat alone in his apartment, scrolling through the footage again, frame by frame. Something bothered him. The angles, the timing, the unnatural pauses in the clip. He pulled up metadata, edited, timestamp manipulated, frame rate inconsistent. The footage was fake. It had been doctored. He followed a hunch and dug through the Marvedon internal server, where old security footage had once been routed. There it was, original file, uncut. He clicked play, same dinner, same exit. But this time, Elijah clearly bowed as they parted. No touch, no scandal. But what followed made his blood run cold. A hidden camera angle. Her uncle, standing across the lobby, talking to someone holding a USB. "Plant it. Leak it. We'll let the boy unravel on his own." Juhyun leaned back in his chair, mind racing. She hadn't betrayed him. He'd betrayed her. And now, if he wanted to be the man worthy of her trust again, he'd have to earn it. Not just with apologies, but with proof. The ballroom gleamed like a weapon polished to perfection. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above black-tie elites. Reporters lined the velvet ropes, their eyes hungry for a scandal. The event? Marvedon International's annual gala. The guest of honor? Chairman Obina Marvedon, Nialuchi's uncle. The story? That the heiress had imploded. That her strategist lover had vanished. That the legacy was back in safe hands. But what no one knew was that Juhyun Lee had arrived, not as a date, not as a guest, but as the man who came to burn the lies to ash. Juhyun stood near the rear exit, dressed in a tailored black suit, one earpiece in, USB drive secure in his breast pocket. He gave the signal. The press room screens, meant to stream gala footage, suddenly flickered. Static, then video, raw, untouched. Lobby footage, audio, clear. Chairman Obina's voice blared over the ballroom. Plant it. Leak it. Let the boy unravel on his own. Heads turned. Gasps broke through champagne toasts. Someone dropped a wine glass. On screen, the fabricated hotel footage was shown side by side with the real security video. The truth became undeniable. Nialuchi had never been unfaithful. Her uncle had doctored the evidence. And Juhyun, he wasn't a leech. He was the man who exposed them all. Juhyun moved toward the center of the room, like a man born for the battlefield. Obina stood near the stage, surrounded by stunned board members. You, the older man spat, trying to maintain composure. You think some theatrics will save you? I don't need theatrics, Juhyun said calmly, eyes locked on his. I have proof. And now, so does everyone else. Reporters surged forward. Cameras flashed. Obina's smile twisted. You don't belong in this world, boy. Juhyun stepped closer. Neither do cowards who forge wills, fake scandals, and ruin legacies just to feel important. You'll regret this, the man hissed. No, Juhyun said. You will. Because I didn't come here alone. And just like that, the crowd parted, and there she was, Nialuchi, in midnight blue satin, curls cascading, chin high, eyes steady. She walked past whispers, past shame, past every judgment that had once tried to cage her. She stood beside Juhyun, took his hand, looked her uncle in the eye. This is your last act, she said quietly. After this, you disappear. Obina laughed, but it was thin now, brittle. You think love is enough to save your empire? She stepped even closer. No, she said, but the truth is, and it just found its microphone. She turned to the cameras. I'm Nialuchi Marvedon, and I stand by the man who stood by me, even when it cost him everything. Then she looked up at Juhyun, eyes full of something deeper than forgiveness, something eternal. Later, in the garden terrace behind the ballroom, they stood in the quiet aftermath of everything. I'm sorry, Juhyun whispered, voice raw. I should have trusted you, like you trusted me from day one. She didn't answer right away. She stepped into him instead, pressed her forehead to his. Then, with eyes wet but proud, she whispered, I don't want day one again, Juhyun. His brows furrowed. What do you mean? She reached into her clutch and pulled out a simple black velvet box. He stared, speechless. Nialuchi was proposing. She opened the box. Inside, a sleek silver ring with a single carved Marvedon crest, a symbol of legacy, transformed. I'm not asking you to save me, she said. I'm asking you to build with me. Forever, if you'll say yes. He let out a shaky laugh, stunned. Are you serious? I am, she whispered. About you. About us. About starting the next chapter on our terms. He looked at her, at the box, at the sky above them, then dropped to his knees in front of her, hand over his heart. Yes, he said. Yes to every word, every battle, every sunrise we get to watch together. She pulled him up, kissed him deep, and the flash of cameras behind the hedges didn't matter anymore. The next morning, news broke across global headlines. From scandal to sovereignty, Nialuchi Marvedon. proposes to strategist who exposed corporate fraud. Power, love, legacy. But behind the scenes, one final forged document was about to surface, one that had the power to strip her name from the family registry forever. And this time, the war wouldn't be legal. It would be personal. The invitations were never printed. There was no press announcement, no designer photo shoot, no magazine deal, because for Nialuchi Marvedon and Juhyun Lee, this wedding wasn't a spectacle. It was a declaration of war and love all at once. They chose a garden in Jeonju, a quiet estate tucked between bamboo groves and low, sloping hills, a place untouched by cameras or corporate ghosts, and they chose the date on purpose. The same day her parents were married. 3 days before the ceremony, her cousin Kichi called. "Just tell him to sign a prenup. It's not personal," he said with that fake silk voice. "It's always personal," she replied, "especially from the people who tried to erase my life." He sighed. "You're making a mistake." She hung up. The next day, the flower vendor canceled last minute. So did the original officiant. And the seamstress for Juhyun's hanbok claimed unforeseen emergencies. Then, the morning of the wedding, her hotel received a legal notice. Notice of injunction. Account freeze pending investigation. Filed by Mrs. Irene Marvedon. Grounds: financial instability, breach of fiduciary responsibility, mental duress. It was a blatant lie, but effective. Every card, every account, every asset in her name was frozen. On her wedding day, Juhyun found her alone in the dressing room. She sat in a custom gold-laced agbada gown, sleek, regal, shoulders squared like royalty. But her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the vanity. "They're trying to ruin this," she whispered. He kneeled in front of her, adjusting the coral beads on her neck. "Then let them try," he said softly. She looked down, tears threatening. "Everything's blocked. I can't pay the caterer, the band, even the estate rental." "I already paid it," he said, standing. She blinked. "You..." He nodded. "The moment I knew I'd marry you, I started preparing. Just in case." She stood too, gripping his hands. "You planned for sabotage on our wedding day?" He smiled faintly. "You're a Marvedon." "Of course I did." She laughed through the tears, pulled him close, whispered against his lips, "You're the only vow I've ever wanted. No velvet chairs, no golden arches, no grand piano. Just a crescent of cherry blossoms, a woven mat beneath their bare feet, and 20 people who knew their truth." She walked down a petal-strewn aisle to the rhythm of soft chorus strings, her train carried by her best friend, her veil held by wind. Juhyun wore a modern handbook in cream and sage, embroidered with a subtle line across the back, her symbol. She wore coral beads from her mother's wedding day and sandals made from Ghanaian kente cloth. The officiant, a mutual mentor from Seoul, asked, "Do you choose one another, not as tools or shields or allies, but as home?" "I do," Juhyun said first, voice unshaken. "I always have," Nialuchi answered. They didn't kiss right away. They just stared, breathing the same air, heartbeats sinking, battle scars fading. Then, finally, she reached for him. The kiss was sacred, slow, a promise sealed in breath and devotion. And just beyond the grove, hidden in a parked black car, her aunt clutched the court papers with trembling hands. "They went through with it," she hissed. The driver said nothing. "Then we hit her where it hurts." She signed the final form. 3 hours after the ceremony, a second injunction was filed, this time not just on her finances, but on her legal ownership of the Marvedon name, claiming she was no longer mentally sound to represent the family brand. And for the first time, They weren't just targeting her money. They were coming for her identity. The cameras were already waiting. They always were. Outside the Marvedon Foundation's new Seoul headquarters, reporters huddled like wolves beneath umbrellas, the air thick with gossip and rain. Nialuchi stepped out of the black car, tall and unbothered in a sand-colored coat, her wedding band glinting beneath her sleeve. She was halfway up the steps when, "Nialuchi Marvedon, you are under arrest for financial fraud, identity misrepresentation, and obstruction of corporate justice." Gasps rippled like thunder. 2 officers closed in from both sides. One took her bag, the other took her wrist. The press erupted. Is this the fall of Marvedon's heiress? Did she steal her own company? She didn't fight. She didn't speak, but her eyes, calm, unflinching, locked on one of the cameras. They can smear my name, she thought, but they will not shatter my truth. He heard the news from a client in Nigeria. By the time the video reached him, it had already gone viral. Nialuchi being led away in cuffs, her chin lifted, her silence louder than headlines. For the first time since they met, Juhyun lost his composure. He didn't just pace. He didn't just curse. He moved. In 24 hours, he activated every contact they'd ever earned, legally, strategically, or emotionally. He summoned civil rights lawyers, forensic accountants, former Marvedon employees pushed out under her aunt's rule. And yes, even past rivals who once called Nialuchi dangerous. "She's more than dangerous," Juhyun said during one midnight call. "She's free, and they hate that." He worked until his knuckles cracked from typing and his voice grew hoarse. Her trial was fast-tracked. Her aunt pulled strings. The world watched. Day 1, prosecutors presented doctored documents, fund transfers, digital trails, all cleverly forged to paint Nialuchi as a self-dealing executive using Marvedon as a personal cash box. Day 2, Juhyun presented the truth. One by one, witnesses took the stand. A former CFO who testified how Iron Marvedon forced her to falsify quarterly reports. A Marvedon intern who confessed to being paid to leak rumors about Nialuchi's mental health. A charity partner from Lagos who presented receipts proving Nialuchi funded an entire clinic with personal funds. During the same week, she was accused of embezzling. Then, it was time. Juhyun's mother stepped forward, small, plain, steady. The courtroom silenced. "I don't have degrees or money," she said, "but I know what it means when someone chooses your son not for who he could become, but for who he already was." Her voice quivered, but never broke. "She didn't just love my boy. She gave him the dignity this world tried to rip away. She saved my son's future. Now I'm asking this court to save hers." No one moved. Even the judge set down his pen. The next morning, the courtroom was so full, the halls echoed with footsteps and hushed prayers. Nialuchi stood tall, wrists no longer cuffed, but eyes still battle-worn. The judge cleared his throat. "This court finds the defendant, Nialuchi Grace Marvedon, not guilty on all counts." A pause. Then, "Furthermore, based on new testimony and evidence submitted to the court, an investigation has been opened into Mrs. Iron Marvedon regarding charges of corporate fraud, witness tampering, and identity obstruction." Gasps. Her aunt, watching from the gallery, stood so quickly her chair clattered. "No, this is her trial." The bailiffs moved toward her, and Nialuchi? She didn't turn around. She walked forward. Outside, the crowd roared with reporters and cameras, but Nialuchi didn't see them. She saw him, Juhyun, waiting, tie askew, face sleepless, eyes full of emotion. She didn't run. She walked, deliberate, unapologetic, And when she reached him, she didn't say a word. She just fell into his arms, hands grasping the lapels of his jacket like she might drown without him. "I'm here," he whispered against her temple, "and I'm not going anywhere." "I know," she said, "because you're the only thing they couldn't destroy." They didn't kiss. Not yet. Some victories were too sacred for spectacle. That evening, Nialuchi entered her name into the court's digital archive and smiled. The Marvedon name still belonged to her, but for the first time, she realized she no longer needed it to win. What she and Juhyun were building couldn't be bought, couldn't be faked, couldn't be stolen. Legacy reborn. The marble floors of Marvedon Tower still gleamed beneath her heels, but they no longer intimidated her. They no longer felt like hers. That was the point. Nialuchi stepped into the boardroom one last time, the same space where they'd once tried to humiliate her, strip her name, control her destiny. This time, she wasn't here to fight. She was here to free herself. She stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding without needing to prove it. "Effective today," she said, sliding a document across the table. "I am liquidating my shares in Marvedon International Holdings." Gasps, stifled murmurs. A man with gray temples cleared his throat. "Ms. Marvedon, your father's name built this company. Are you sure you want to walk away?" She looked around slowly, at the faces who had watched her rise, fall, and survive. "I'm not walking away from his name," she said. "I'm walking into my own. No threats, no fanfare, no need for vengeance, just liberation." The next day, global headlines read, "Nialuchi Marvedon sells stake in family empire to fund ethical ventures across 3 continents and across Lagos, Accra, Seoul, and Johannesburg." Something began to grow. Seed funding for female tech founders, a mentorship program connecting immigrant youth with global CEOs, a pipeline for South-South trade alliances, cutting out exploitative middlemen. This wasn't just legacy, this was redemption with intention. Meanwhile, Juhyun's agency, Axis Strategies, skyrocketed. What began as a skeleton crew turned into a powerhouse. Why? Because the man who had once been mocked as a nobody had publicly outplayed Korea's most powerful CEOs. He became legend, not flashy, not cold, just unreasonably brilliant. Governments consulted him. Non-profits trusted him. Corporations feared him, because he always found the weak spot in any lie. But at night, he still made tea for 2, and waited up for her. Every time. It was nearly midnight when they stood on the rooftop of their new foundation, HQ. The city hummed below. The stars above blinked soft and unbothered. Nialuchi stood at the railing in a cream turtleneck dress, hair up, gold earrings catching moonlight. Juhyun came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, chin on her shoulder. "You smell like ginger," he murmured. She laughed softly. "You say that like it's a confession." "It's a promise," he replied. They stood in silence, hearts beating in sync. Then she turned to him. "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if we had met before all of this?" He tilted his head. "Honestly? No." She raised a brow. He reached for her hand. "Because this version of you," he said, "the one who walked through fire and still builds, she's the woman I want to raise a future with." Her breath caught. "You want to have kids?" she asked gently. "With you," he said, tightening his grip on her fingers. "Yes. God, yes." She smiled then. Not her boardroom smile, not her press smile, the real one. "I want that too," she whispered. "A family. Not for appearances, not for legacy, just for us." He leaned in and kissed her, slow, reverent, not as an heir, not as an outlaw, but as a man choosing peace and as a woman choosing love on her own terms. The wind swept across the rooftop, cool and sweet. They stood there hand in hand, staring out over the city, and Nialuchi said quietly, "We rewrote the empire. Now let's write the next chapter." 1 year later, it didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like peace, the kind of peace that's quiet and steady, built after storms, not in spite of them. Nialuchi stood in the top floor conference room of the Marvedon Legacy Foundation's Seoul headquarters, the morning sun pouring through wide glass windows. Behind her, across the marble wall, a single frame held a simple message in elegant script: "Build where no one can burn it down." She used to think that meant walls. Now, she knew it meant roots. In just 12 months, the foundation had grown beyond their boldest projections. In Lagos, the tech hub they funded now housed over 300 young African innovators, many of them women. In Accra, a school-to-career pipeline was giving scholarships to students from underrepresented communities. In Seoul, the microgrant initiative Juhyun built had helped 500 youth launch small businesses from forgotten neighborhoods. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was changing lives. The kind of change that didn't make headlines, but healed histories. One morning, they returned to Jeonju, where their love had once been tested, and triumphed. In the gentle arms of the hills, a small school had been built. Stone and cedar, sunlight-filled windows, books in both Korean and English, math and music echoing down the halls. A single name carved into the archway: Grace Institute of Vision and Courage, named after her mother. They kept the ceremony simple. No PR, no press, just families, teachers, smiling children in uniforms, a few elderly women with tears in their eyes. As the choir sang, Nialuchi placed her hand on Juhyun's. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of fulfillment. "You did this," he whispered. "No," she said, eyes fixed on the children. "We did." Later that evening, as the sun slipped low behind the hills, they walked the school's courtyard, the laughter of students still echoing from inside. Shoes in hand, they stepped barefoot onto the cool stone path between the gardens, their shadows stretching long and soft. Juhyun stopped, turned toward her. "You look at this place," he said, "like you're seeing something the rest of us can't." She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I am. I'm seeing what she would have seen. Your mom, she would have loved this. Not because it has her name, but because it means someone remembered what she dreamed." He nodded. "You didn't just protect her memory. You honored it." Then she turned fully, placing both hands against his chest, eyes luminous. "You didn't just change my life, Juhyun." He looked at her, gentle, quiet, endlessly steady. "You gave mine a place to begin," he whispered. The courtyard echoed with the sound of sneakers slapping against stone. A group of children ran past them, laughing, chasing each other with paper planes, arms stretched wide like wings. Juhyun reached for her hand. She slid her fingers into his, and together, they stood in the middle of everything they built. Not a company, not a throne, but a future that no one could take from them 5 years later. Location: a quiet countryside home in Jeolla Province, South Korea. Time: late spring, just after a rainstorm. The rain had stopped, but the scent of petrichor still kissed the air, wrapping the hills in something sacred and soft. A small child, barefoot, wild curls bouncing, ran across the wet garden path, giggling. "Uma! Apa!" I caught it! In her hand, a crumpled piece of paper shaped like a plane. It had vision written in green crayon across the wings. From the porch, Nialuchi laughed, wrapped in a warm cardigan, hair longer now, freer. Juhyun leaned beside her, arms crossed, smile lazy and deeply content. "She's fast," he murmured. "She's 4, Nialuchi replied, sipping from a clay mug. "Everything is still magic." He nodded, eyes on the child darting through the puddles in a kente skirt and yellow rain boots. "Do you think she'll grow up knowing what it costs to build this piece?" Nialuchi didn't answer right away. She turned to him instead, eyes shining. "She won't have to know the war, Juhyun. She'll live in what we built from it." Their daughter, Sana Grace Lee, spun in the garden, arms outstretched, singing to herself in a mix of Korean and English. "Build where no one can burn it down," Juhyun quoted softly, eyes never leaving her. "She is our foundation," Nialuchi said. "She's our forever," he added. They stood there in silence, listening to the quiet echo of the storm retreating behind the hills, replaced by laughter and new beginnings. Later that night, after Sina fell asleep between them with her head on Juhyun's chest and her feet curled toward her mother's stomach, Nialuchi whispered, "Do you think she'll inherit your strategy?" He grinned, barely opening his eyes. "I hope she inherits your fire." "Or my stare," she said with mock pride. "Oh God, not the stare," he muttered, already drifting. She chuckled into the dark, then whispered, "We named her Grace because she reminded me of my mother. But we raised her with the peace I only found in you." He kissed her hand where it rested on the blanket. "Then she's everything we fought for." Outside the window, the night was quiet. No press, no signatures, no legacy to protect. Just a home, a sleeping child, and 2 souls who rewrote history. Together. The end.